The galaxy had grown numb to violence. Across thousands of systems, civilizations rose and fell, alliances shattered and reformed, and the strong preyed on the weak with casual cruelty. Empires ruled with an iron grip, their leaders assured of their invincibility, their atrocities nothing more than distant echoes to those not directly affected. But on one particular day, in one particular corner of space, something happened that shattered that illusion. A transmission flickered to life across every major network in the galactic core, hijacked by the Tyranthian Empire's state media. Screens across the cosmos displayed an ominous hall bathed in crimson light. Rows upon rows of shackled human women knelt in silence, their faces pale, their bodies trembling. Behind them stood a line of Tyranthian enforcers, hulking figures in obsidian armor, their energy rifles humming with the anticipation of a kill. The scene held for exactly 10 seconds. Enough time for confusion to set in, enough time for outrage to simmer beneath the surface. Then a towering figure stepped into frame, Emperor Vizier of the Tyranthian Empire, his 6 eyes glistening with amusement as he raised his clawed hands in a dramatic gesture. "The age of human arrogance ends today," he declared, his voice a guttural growl translated into hundreds of languages. "These creatures, these weaklings, dare to challenge the rule of the Empire. They dare to claim equality. They demand rights." A ripple of laughter swept through the imperial chamber. For the Tyranthians, this was a spectacle, a lesson to those who believed they could challenge authority. But elsewhere, in countless star systems where humans lived, where they worked and dreamed of the stars, the reaction was far from passive. Vizier turned back to the captives. 50,000 of your kind, he mused, walking down the row, his fingers dragging across trembling shoulders. A generous warning, a taste of what awaits any species that believes in defiance. And with a simple nod, the executions began. The enforcers raised their rifles. The first row collapsed before they had even realized what was happening. Bodies slumped forward, heads jerked back, mouths frozen mid-scream. The second row fell seconds later, then the third. The screams were swallowed by the ominous hum of the energy discharges, drowned out by the mechanical efficiency of the slaughter. In the far reaches of the galaxy, humanity watched in stunned silence. Governments froze. Soldiers gripped their weapons in helpless fury. Families collapsed in grief. But amidst the horror, amidst the unbearable rage boiling in human hearts, one reaction eclipsed them all. Earth laughed. Not the laughter of amusement, not the chuckles of acceptance. No, this was a different sound altogether. A dark, quiet, dangerous thing. It was the kind of laughter that echoed in the back of a bar before a brawl erupted. The kind of laughter exchanged between outnumbered Marines before they charged into certain death. The kind of laughter that promised a storm. On Mars, a grizzled engineer in an oil-streaked jumpsuit set down his wrench, cracked his knuckles, and muttered, "Oh, they're doomed." On Titan, a human weapons specialist grinned, adjusting the targeting systems on an orbital railgun. "I'd say we give them about 2 weeks." On Earth, in a quiet chamber deep within the United Terran Coalition headquarters, Ambassador Ryan Killian rewound the transmission, watching the massacre in stony silence. His coffee sat untouched beside him, a rare occurrence for someone who practically mainlined caffeine. The room was empty save for his assistant, a young analyst, who had been in the middle of briefing him on trade negotiations before the broadcast, had overridden all communications. "Ryan," she said, her voice wavering, "what do we do?" He let the question hang in the air. What do we do? It was a question humanity had been asked time and time again, every time some arrogant species mistook their patience for weakness, their diplomacy for cowardice. Ryan exhaled slowly, then reached for his communicator. "Patch me through to the Galactic Federation," he said. His assistant blinked. "The Federation? You think they'll do anything?" Ryan grinned. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Oh no. They won't lift a damn finger. But they'll listen. And once they hear what I have to say, they'll understand one thing very clearly." He took a sip of his now cold coffee and leaned back in his chair. "The Tyranthians are already dead. They just don't know it yet. The Federation Council chamber was a grand, sterile monstrosity of metal and glass, meant to symbolize unity and progress. Today, however, it was filled with the nervous murmurs of diplomats from 100 species, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of uncertainty. The broadcast had shaken them. That much was clear. But as always, fear of action outweighed any sense of moral obligation. Ryan strode into the chamber with the easy confidence of a man who had already won the argument before it had even begun. He took his seat, lazily flicking on his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen of the esteemed Federation," he drawled. "Let's cut this. You all saw the transmission. 50,000 civilians murdered on live broadcast. Now, let me save us all some time. There's no debate to be had here. No deliberation. No, we must consider the political ramifications." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost amused. "Because, you see, humanity's already decided how this is going to go. We're just here to be polite about it." A Lorkian diplomat, a slug-like creature whose species prided itself on neutrality, shifted uncomfortably. "Ambassador Killian, the Federation cannot simply—" "Spare me," Ryan interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "You and I both know the Federation won't take direct action. We know how this dance goes. You'll issue some weak condemnation, maybe freeze some trade routes. But you won't intervene." He leaned forward, his grin widening. "Which is fine, really, because we don't need you." The room went still. One of the Tyranthian representatives scoffed, clicking his mandibles. "Empty threats, human. Your species is outnumbered, outgunned. The Empire." Ryan barked out a laugh. "Oh, that's cute. You think this is a fight?" The Tyranthian's mandibles twitched in confusion. "It's not." Ryan's grin was all teeth. "Oh no, my dear genocidal lizard. This isn't a fight. This is an extermination." He tapped a button on his datapad, and the screens around the chamber flickered to life. Satellite footage, ship movements, fleet deployments, all evidence that humanity had already begun its response before even stepping into this room. Factories on Luna churning out warships at an accelerated rate. Cyberattacks already crippling Tyranthian supply lines. A dozen of their border outposts already offline. Ryan Killian had walked into this meeting not to ask for help, but to deliver a message. We don't want negotiations. We don't want reparations. We don't even want revenge. His smile faded. We want you gone. The Tyranthian representative sneered, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his expression now. You cannot possibly believe. Ryan leaned back, stretching. You ever heard of Earth history? He mused. There was a little country called the United States. Got attacked once. Big mistake. You see, humans have this funny thing about them. We don't let things go. Ever. His expression turned sharp, cold. We are coming. And when we do, there will be no discussions, no second chances. Only one truth. The Tyranthian Empire ends here. The chamber was silent. Then one of the smaller species, a fragile-looking diplomat from a world that had suffered under the Tyranthians for centuries, spoke. I vote in favor of full military sanctions. One by one, others followed. The motion passed. Ryan exhaled, the first real breath he'd taken in what felt like hours. He stood, nodding to the stunned Federation members. Thank you for your cooperation, he said pleasantly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a war to win. As he strode from the chamber, his assistant fell into step beside him. So what now? Ryan grinned, cracking his knuckles. Now, he chuckled. Now we make them beg. Ryan Killian had been in politics long enough to know that words were weapons. But now, words were no longer enough. Humanity's response had already begun before he even left the Galactic Federation chamber. The gears of war turned with terrifying efficiency, and for the first time in its long, blood-stained history, the Tyranthian Empire had become the hunted. It started with a whisper. An unknown source leaked the details of the Empire's darkest secrets. Files containing planetary purges, illegal experiments, and war crimes spanning centuries flooded the galactic networks, reaching every species that had ever suffered under the Empire's rule. Civilizations that once cowered in fear suddenly found themselves furious. The Tyranthian propaganda machine scrambled to counter the narrative, but it was too late. The whisper became a roar, a movement, a rebellion ignited by a species that refused to be another footnote in the Empire's conquests. Earth's military command didn't wait for permission from the Federation. They didn't waste time drafting carefully worded ultimatums or empty threats. The moment Ryan left that meeting, the first strikes had already begun. The Empire's core supply lines fell overnight. No dramatic space battles, no grand invasions, just silence. Human cyber warfare teams had infiltrated their logistical networks and shut them down so cleanly that entire fleets found themselves stranded. Warships designed to conquer planets were suddenly reduced to cold, floating coffins in the void. Orbital stations around key Tyranthian colonies lost all power. Their automated defense systems turned against them, firing upon their own fleets as humans hijacked their networks with unsettling ease. Smugglers and mercenaries, many of whom had long suffered under the Empire's thumb, found their bank accounts mysteriously swelling overnight, accompanied by a simple message: burn it down. And so they did. Ryan stood on the bridge of a human dreadnought, staring at the holo display as Tyranthian worlds flickered with spreading chaos. He had expected the Empire to react with immediate force, to come crashing down on them with the full might of their war machine. Instead, their response was sluggish, confused. They weren't ready for this, his intelligence officer murmured beside him. Ryan tilted his head. How the hell were they not ready? They committed a public execution of 50,000 civilians. Did they think we'd just write a strongly worded letter? The intelligence officer, a woman named Reyes, exhaled through her nose, arms crossed. They've never fought a species like us. Most races in the galaxy operate on slow, calculated moves. They expect bureaucracy, debate, hesitation. She nodded toward the display. But we're human. We don't hesitate. We don't warn. We retaliate. Ryan smirked. It's almost unfair. Reyes arched a brow. You feel bad for them? Ryan took a slow sip of his coffee. Oh, absolutely not. The Empire's first real counterattack came days later. A fleet of 20 warships descended upon one of Earth's outermost colonies, expecting a swift and decisive conquest. The admiral leading the charge had likely envisioned an easy victory, imagining his name carved into history as the Tyranthian who delivered humanity's head on a platter. Instead, his fleet arrived to find the colony abandoned. Or at least, it seemed abandoned. Sensors picked up no active life signs, no defensive fleets, no orbital resistance. The Tyranthians, ever the arrogant conquerors, took the bait. They landed troops, moving through the colony with the precision of a species that had done this 1,000 times before. Then the doors locked behind them, and the bombs went off. Ryan watched the footage as human commandos emerged from underground tunnels, clad in adaptive armor and moving with the lethal grace of wolves among sheep. The Tyranthians never stood a chance. The Empire had never fought humans in true ground combat, had never seen the way Earth's soldiers fought, not with rigid formations and predictable tactics, but with brutality, deception, and an unnerving willingness to cheat. Ryan turned to his chief strategist, raising a brow. I assumed that was not in the Geneva Conventions. The man barely glanced up from his datapad. Sir, the Geneva Conventions don't apply to genocidal lizard fascists. Ryan nodded. Fair. With every battle, the Tyranthian forces faltered further. The strength of their empire had always been its ability to instill fear. Their enemies surrendered before wars even began, choosing servitude over extinction. But fear only worked when it went one way. And right now, humanity was terrifying. The first cracks in the Empire's rule didn't come from human attacks alone. They came from inside. Civilian uprisings erupted on over a dozen Tyranthian worlds. Enslaved species, once too terrified to rebel, suddenly found themselves emboldened. Some of them received direct shipments of human weapons, accompanied by instructional videos titled, So you want to overthrow your oppressors, a step-by-step guide narrated by a man who sounded far too enthusiastic about planetary revolutions. The Empire's leaders scrambled to contain the chaos, but every solution they devised only made things worse. Attempts to silence the uprisings resulted in further media leaks, exposing even more atrocities. Their allies, once loyal out of fear, began jumping ship. The Taranthian High Command convened in a desperate attempt to restore order. Their generals spoke of deploying larger fleets, of crushing Earth before the rebellion spiraled further. Then their capital's orbital defenses shut down. For a moment, they thought it was another cyberattack. A system glitch, perhaps. Then the first human warship entered low orbit. And then another. And another. By the time the Taranthians realized what was happening, it was too late. Ryan Killian stood aboard the flagship, staring down at the homeworld of the very empire that had once declared humanity insignificant. "You're sure we're through their defenses?" he asked. His communications officer nodded. "Their systems are fried. They won't be able to fire a single shot." Ryan exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "Well, that's disappointing." He turned to the fleet commander. "All right, begin the broadcast." Across the Taranthian homeworld, every screen flickered to life. In homes, in military bases, in the great halls of their government, one image appeared. Ryan Killian, sitting casually with a cup of coffee, legs crossed, staring directly into the camera. "Hey there," he said, voice laced with amusement. "Bet you weren't expecting this." Silence stretched across the world. "Now, I know you're all probably wondering how we got here. I mean, one moment, you guys are ruling the galaxy, throwing genocidal live streams for fun, and the next, your fleets are gone, your planets are on fire, and a human is sitting in your sky drinking a damn fine cup of coffee." He took a sip. Delicious. He leaned forward, tone shifting. "Here's the deal. You lost. You just haven't accepted it yet. Your armies are broken. Your people are rioting. And, as we speak, every species you've ever oppressed is sharpening their knives, getting ready to carve their pound of flesh from your dying empire." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to surrender. Not negotiate. Surrender. Completely. Unconditionally." The Taranthian High Command, watching in stunned silence, finally snapped. The Emperor himself, furious and desperate, stormed into view of the transmission, snarling into the camera. "You think you can threaten us?" he spat. "We will never kneel to a primitive race of savages." Ryan's grin widened. "Oh, buddy, you already have." At his signal, the human fleet fired. Not at the cities, not at civilians. At their statues. At their symbols of power. The great monuments of the Taranthian Empire. The towering spires that had loomed over their people as reminders of their eternal dominion, crumbled into dust before their very eyes. The Emperor's rage faltered. The fear that flickered in his gaze was the same fear he had inflicted on others for centuries. Ryan tilted his head. "Still feeling proud, champ?" The Emperor's silence was all the answer he needed. Ryan exhaled, taking another sip of coffee. "Welcome to the New Order." The sky above the Taranthian homeworld was on fire. Flames licked at the heavens as the wreckage of the Empire's once mighty fleet tumbled through the atmosphere, burning streaks of metal and shattered hulls marking their final descent. The battle should have ended days ago. The Empire's defenses had crumbled, their ships disabled, their orbital stations seized. Yet still, they refused to surrender. The Taranthians, proud to the point of delusion, had retreated to their last bastion, their capital, a fortress world designed to withstand entire planetary sieges. Ryan Killian stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Havoc, staring at the holographic map of the battlefield. His expression was unreadable, but beneath it, a slow simmer of impatience burned. Humanity had already won. The Taranthian forces were barely functional, their leaders cut off from their fleets, their supplies dwindling to nothing. Yet still, they refused to accept reality. "They always do this," he muttered, rubbing his temple. Reyes, his intelligence officer, leaned against the table beside him, arms crossed. "Dictatorships don't go down easy." They'd rather burn their own house down than let someone else take it. Ryan exhaled, then turned to the fleet commander. How long until we breach their planetary shields? The commander hesitated, a flicker of frustration crossing his face. They're using a decentralized power grid. Every time we take down a node, another kicks in. It's not going to hold forever, but they're buying time. Ryan tapped his fingers against the table. Buying time for what? They don't have a fleet anymore. No reinforcements. No allies. What's their endgame? Reyes frowned, then pulled up a new data feed. We intercepted some internal communications before they locked down transmissions. It's fragmented, but there's a repeating phrase, Project Revenant. Ryan's eyes narrowed. That sounds ominous. It usually is. Ryan sighed, rubbing his jaw. He had spent most of his life dealing with political posturing, but when it came down to it, war had a rhythm. People fought for 3 reasons: greed, desperation, or faith. The Taranthians had lost their greed when their empire crumbled. Their desperation had driven them to hole up in their last city. But faith? That was always the wild card. He straightened. All right, enough waiting. Ready to drop teams. If they won't surrender, we're taking the fight to their front door. The order sent a ripple through the command deck. Officers moved swiftly, activating attack formations, mobilizing ground forces. The final battle for the Taranthian capital had begun. An hour later, the human drop pods tore through the skies like falling meteors, breaking through the weakened planetary defenses. The capital city stretched beneath them, a maze of towering spires, shattered infrastructure, and fortified bunkers. The once pristine city was already in ruins, reduced to rubble by orbital bombardments and its own citizens' uprisings. Smoke coiled through the streets, the acrid scent of burning metal thick in the air. Ryan's pod slammed into the ground with a bone-rattling impact. The doors blasted open, and he stepped out, rifle in hand, combat armor locking into place around him. Around him, squads of human soldiers emerged from their own pods, fanning out into the war-torn streets. The city was eerily silent. Too silent. Ryan's instinct screamed at him, a deep, primal sense of unease curling in his gut. He tapped his comm. Reyes, give me eyes on the city. What the hell are they planning? Static crackled. Then Reyes' voice came through, sharp and urgent. Ryan, you need to move. Now. He didn't hesitate. What is it? Project Revenant isn't a weapon, she said, her voice tight. It's them. They're turning themselves into it. Ryan's mind raced, but then, in the distance, he saw movement. Not soldiers. Not tanks. Something else. At first, he thought they were civilians. Figures moving in the shadows, twitching, stumbling, then sprinting. Then more of them appeared, pouring from the alleyways, from collapsed buildings. Their bodies twisted, unnatural. Their skin had turned a sickly, translucent gray, their eyes blackened pits. And then, with an ear-piercing, inhuman shriek, they charged. Ryan barely had time to react before the first wave hit. They moved faster than any Taranthian he had ever seen, their bodies contorting in impossible ways, their limbs stretching unnaturally as they lunged at the soldiers. Gunfire erupted across the battlefield. Human rifles, precise and lethal, tore through them, but they kept coming. Ryan dropped one with a shot to the head, then another, but for every one that fell, 3 more took its place. Fall back, he barked into his comm. Reyes, what the hell am I looking at? Her voice was grim. The Taranthians knew they couldn't win, so they tried to cheat death. They experimented on themselves, biological augmentation, forced genetic mutations. The ones who survived the process, well, they aren't exactly Taranthians anymore. Ryan gritted his teeth. That's fantastic. His squad fell back to a defensive position, using the wreckage of a downed Taranthian warship as cover. The creatures kept coming, throwing themselves at the barricade in relentless waves. One of Ryan's soldiers, a grizzled veteran named Kowalski, grunted as he slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. You know, sir, I was expecting a fight. Didn't expect a goddamn horror movie. Ryan exhaled sharply, firing another round into the horde. Welcome to the finale. They held the line, but it was clear this wasn't sustainable. They were outnumbered and the enemy didn't tire. For every one they killed, another 100 replaced it. Then, in the distance, something bigger moved. Ryan turned just in time to see a massive shape rise from the ruins. It was Tyranthian, or at least it had been. But its body had fused with mechanical plating, pulsing veins of biosynthetic material running through it. It was monstrous, standing at least 15 feet tall, with elongated limbs and a mouth that shouldn't exist. It roared, a distorted, metallic howl that sent a wave of pure terror through the battlefield. Ryan didn't hesitate. Everyone focused fire on that thing. His soldiers opened fire, their weapons blazing, but the creature barely flinched. It moved too fast for something its size, closing the distance in seconds. It swiped a massive claw, sending one of the human soldiers flying, armor cracking against the impact. Ryan barely had time to react before it turned on him. The world blurred. He moved on instinct, rolling aside just as the monstrous Tyranthian slammed into the ground where he had stood. The force of the impact sent shock waves through the rubble, scattering debris. Ryan came up fast, leveling his rifle. 2 shots. Nothing. A third, its head barely moved. "Reyes," he ground out. "I need options." "Working on it," she shot back. "You might want to stall." Ryan muttered a curse, then did what he did best, improvised. "Hey, ugly," he shouted, holstering his rifle and drawing the high-yield plasma grenade strapped to his belt. The creature turned, its hollow eyes fixing on him. Ryan smirked. "Catch." He threw the grenade directly into its mouth. It barely had time to react before the device detonated. The explosion ripped through its skull, sending chunks of biomechanical flesh in all directions. The ground shook from the force, and for the first time since the battle began, the horde hesitated. That was all they needed. Reyes' voice came through the comms, breathless. "Ryan, our fleet is ready. Clear the way. We're burning the whole sector." Ryan exhaled. Finally, he turned back to his team. "You heard her. Fall back to extraction. Let's finish this." As they retreated, the sky above them lit up. Human warships unleashed hell. Orbital strikes rained down, each blast consuming entire districts in fire and devastation. The monstrous remnants of the Tyranthian Empire screeched as their mutated bodies disintegrated beneath the bombardment. Ryan watched from a distance, chest rising and falling with each breath. It was over. The Empire was gone. And humanity? They had just claimed the galaxy. The galaxy was different now. It was a strange, eerie kind of silence that followed the war. The kind that settled over a battlefield long after the last screams had faded. The kind that whispered in the corridors of abandoned palaces, where emperors once sat, dictating the fates of entire civilizations. The Tyranthian Empire, a force that had loomed over the stars for centuries, had been reduced to ash. Their fleets were gone. Their capital lay in ruins. Their people, once so certain of their place at the top of the food chain, now huddled in the shadows, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Ryan Killian stood in what remained of the Empire's grand war chamber, the very heart of their dominion. The room was a wreck, cracked marble floors, shattered pillars, the gilded banners of the Tyranthian regime lying in tattered heaps across the scorched ground. It smelled of smoke, burnt circuitry, and something deeper, the stench of finality. A single throne stood at the end of the hall, still intact but empty. The seat of power abandoned. It was fitting. Ryan exhaled and took a slow sip from the cup in his hand. His fingers curled around a steaming mug of coffee. It was cold. He didn't care. The drink was more about the ritual than the taste. A moment to pause, to process, to acknowledge what had been done. Behind him, Reyes leaned against a broken console, arms crossed, surveying the room with sharp, calculating eyes. You know, for all the screaming about their so-called divine rule, they sure ran like cowards at the end. Ryan snorted. That's the thing about bullies. They act like gods when they're on top, but the second they realize they can bleed, they panic. Reyes tilted her head, studying him. "You don't seem happy." Ryan took another sip. "Should I be?" She hesitated, then sighed. I don't know. We won. It's over. Humanity just took out the biggest threat in the galaxy. Shouldn't there be some kind of, I don't know, celebration? Ryan rolled his shoulders, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on him. We won, yeah. But there's a difference between winning a war and winning peace. His gaze drifted back to the empty throne. The Taranthians are finished, but the galaxy's still spinning. Someone's going to have to pick up the pieces. And that, more than anything, was what worried him. Humanity had never set out to rule the stars. They had fought for justice, for vengeance, for survival. But in the absence of tyranny, something always had to take its place. As if summoned by his thoughts, his communicator buzzed. He sighed and answered. A grainy hologram flickered to life, displaying the anxious face of Chancellor Auron, one of the high-ranking officials of the Galactic Federation. The man looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usually pristine robes now slightly disheveled. Ambassador Killian, Auron said, voice strained. I assume you've seen the reports. Ryan arched a brow. Which ones? The ones about the Taranthian death cults forming underground, the mercenary groups looting the outer colonies, or the Federation Council completely losing its collective mind over who gets to fill the power vacuum. The Chancellor rubbed his temples. All of them. Ryan took another sip of his coffee. Yeah, it's a mess. Auron exhaled sharply. We need stability, Ryan. And the truth is, you and your people are the only ones in a position to provide it. Ryan set down his mug, narrowing his eyes. What exactly are you asking? A beat of silence. Then, carefully, the Chancellor said, the Federation wants Earth to take a leadership role. A major one. Not just a seat at the table. The seat at the table. Ryan stared at him. Then he barked out a short, incredulous laugh. Oh, hell no. The Chancellor's expression didn't change. Ryan. No, Ryan said flatly, rubbing his forehead. I know how this game works. You want us to step in, stabilize things, keep all the pissed-off factions from tearing each other apart. Great. But I also know that the second we take that seat, every other species is going to start screaming about human imperialism. He gestured vaguely. We just nuked an empire. We're not about to become one. The Chancellor's mouth tightened. If Earth doesn't step up, others will. Do you trust anyone else with that kind of power? That was the problem. Ryan didn't. The Federation was weak-willed. The surviving remnants of the Taranthian military were regrouping in the fringes of space, and countless smaller factions, smugglers, and opportunists were already carving out their own pieces of the galaxy. Without leadership, chaos would fester. Reyes, silent until now, spoke up. We don't have to take over, she said carefully. But we can guide what comes next. Ryan frowned. How? She nodded toward the broken throne. By making sure no one ever sits in a chair like that again. Ryan considered her words. His gaze flicked back to the Chancellor. Fine. We'll help. But on our terms. No empires, no puppet governments. If the galaxy wants peace, we all build it together. Auron studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll inform the Council. The transmission cut off. Ryan let out a slow breath. This was the real battle. The one that came after the war. Reyes tilted her head. You think they'll listen? Ryan huffed. Oh, they'll listen. He picked up his mug, frowning as he realized it was empty. Whether they actually learn anything, that's a different story. Outside the ruined palace, the city was beginning to stir. The streets, once filled with screams and gunfire, now buzzed with something new. Rebuilding. Taranthian civilians, former slaves, rebel factions, all trying to figure out what came next. Ryan and Reyes stepped outside, looking over the war-torn skyline. You ever think, she mused, that humans weren't supposed to be here? Ryan snorted. Oh, all the time. She smirked. And yet here we are. Ryan glanced at her. Yeah, here we are. A transmission request pinged on his wrist, a new signal, unknown origin. Ryan frowned and answered. A deep, resonant voice crackled through the device. We have been watching. Ryan's grip on the communicator tightened. Reyes shot him a sharp look, already reaching for her weapon. The voice continued. You are unexpected. The air between them felt colder, charged with something intangible. Ryan's pulse remained steady, but his mind raced. This wasn't Taranthian. This wasn't Federation. This was something else. The voice, ancient and unreadable, spoke one last time. We will be seeing you soon. The transmission cut. Silence. Ryan stared at the comm, then exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. Well, he muttered, that's not ominous at all. Reyes gave him a flat look. Ryan. I know. He rubbed his temple, letting out a short, tired laugh. Looks like we've got company. She shook her head. You just can't catch a break, can you? Ryan smirked, the exhaustion fading just enough to let something else slip through. Anticipation. Wouldn't be any fun if I did. And just like that, the next war began.